All right.
All right.
Welcome to another episode of Rocco's Basilisk. I'd like to welcome both of our listeners today. Um, Michael Thorne, Dr. Michael Thorne Kelly is with us as a repeat. I come back to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Always.
And you were just telling me about your novel you're working on.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. My, it's a thought experiment, whether it ever becomes a novel or not. But um, it's kind of the way I extrapolate about where the world's going to go. All right. So one of the things that I think we talked about, but not quite in these terms, about human nature and AI was the problem. It's a fundamental problem with biology, and the ultimate expression of that problem is that all biological systems cheat. So what does that mean? Does it mean that Graham's a cheater and Michael's a cheater? Yeah, we are. I have watched accountants suddenly lose the ability to count, to add and subtract when their self-interest was involved. I mean, it's a wonder to watch. It's a wonder to watch. When your sense of self, sense of survival enters the context that you're thinking about, all kinds of maladapt, well, no, all kinds of evolutionary adaptations, biases, cognitive biases kick in, and you will delude yourself. you know, your thinking makes sense to you. The fact that it's mathematically illogical, it just sort of escapes you, right? But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I was just Let me jump up and show you a book. I'll be right back.
Okay.
It's Herman Kahn. Whenever you're the brilliant Rand, the guy who's founded Rand, um, whenever he got a new assignment, the first thing he'd do is go and check out, or have one of his staff check out books on the subject that were appropriate for middle schoolers. And that's how he would begin introducing himself into a subject. Well, okay, I've got Piketty's Capital on my shelf, right?
Yep.
But this is called Capital and Ideology,
The graphic novel.
the graphic novel, and it is to die for. It is wonderful. I'm gonna go out and give my kids copies of it and keep one for myself. It's by Claire Alette and Benjamin Adam. Um, but what I love about it is that you see, I mean, you read Capital and you'll it's in there, but man, it's Capital's overwhelming, right? I
I
mean,
read it.
it's that thick. Yeah. Well, I didn't
I
finish it.
remember I read the whole thing. I remember very little of it.
Well, exactly. I know that. Honestly, the translation from French wasn't all that great, which didn't help. But this takes a family, multiple generations in France, through the real history of France, and shows you how people were thinking. So I was just talking about how human beings cheat, right? Well, I don't know. They never actually say this in the book in so many words. I don't remember anywhere that it says human beings always cheat, but Human beings always cheat, you know. They always make up stories about, and this is normal human beings. I'm not talking about psychopaths and sociopaths. I mean, normal human beings make up stories about how they're being good, and they're being rewarded for their goodness. But when you look at it from the perspective of, say, the colonialists, the colonized people you're dealing with, it doesn't look so good for them, you know. And the reason we cheat, you know, evolution is mathematical. This is why I really am excited about Wolfram's stuff. And in fact, his project to create computational physics, in other words, to express everything we know of reality in computational terms, is really panning out. And I had an intuition when I first stumbled across it that it just made sense to me. But more importantly, that it would be a means of communicating across, you know, between a human experience and an AI's experience. Because well, I don't want that's segueing too far, but so evolution is mathematical. And if you look at game theory tells you that if you're a perfect competitor, right? We talked about this last time. You always win or tie. You never lose. And this is in contrast to being a perfect cooperator, where you always tie or lose. You never win in the sense that you're creating losers, right? Whereas in competition, you're winning by creating losers. Okay, so no one's a perfect competitor. Well, nature's not stupid. It recognizes that perfect competition ain't going to happen. And we'll get into partly why no one ends up being a perfect competitor. So, but what it does then is say, well, then what you want to do is cheat. And so biological systems, you know, the more dependent on predation, you know.
Okay, can you explain something a second? I
Sure.
understand the definition of cheat amongst humans involved in a contract or under a single social contract. But what do you mean in evolution?
Okay. In a sense, zebras having stripes is cheating. It's pretending to be something that it's not.
Okay. What does it pertain to be?
Grass.
Oh, I don't think any lions are confused in that sense. I think for them, it blurs the lines between individuals when they're running after the herd.
It does that too. But bear in mind, when that zebra or that gazelle is popping along at 30 miles an hour, you know, that lion can only do a burst. It can't run a mile. You know, it's got a couple of 100 yards at most. And it only has to miss by an eighth of an inch. And trying to keep track. You remember, they're not as smart as we are. So there's a lot of processing going on, right? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like when you're driving down the road and you see a chipmunk start to run across, and then it stops right in the middle of the road, and you're going, "You idiot! Make up your mind. I don't know which way to steer to avoid running over you, and I really don't want to run over you." Why does it stop in the middle of the road? Because its computational capacity hit its
Yeah.
limit. You know, my IQ is such that I process information on the order of 70% faster than somebody from Mensa. And I don't know how much faster a Mensa person, processes information than a normal person, and and so on down, right? What I know is that I'm as much smarter than the average person as the average person, and smarter here is just the efficiency of processing. All right. Um, than a normal person is to someone who has to be institutionalized because they cannot feed themselves. And what does that mean? It just means my brain is working more efficiently and faster. There's no moral virtue, goodness, blah blah. And, it's just processing speed. There and here's the critical thing: being smarter is not better, because if you give, no, okay, there's a limit. Uh, but if you give somebody who can process at all good information and some memory support, they'll get the same answers I get.
There are times when I find that being too smart leads you down the wrong path. And it's a
You
little
bet.
bit like overfitting with a neural network. So if you have a network or a model of some kind that's reasonably sized or appropriately sized to a task, it will often learn enough. It won't be perfect, but it'll learn enough and it will be somewhat generalizable. If you have a lot more parameters, a lot more neurons in this model, then it has the ability to overfit, and it will get to all the little grooves of a pattern, and it will be perfect, but not generalizable at all. And I find that there are people who are what you would call very smart, but they end up with some set of ideas that turn out to be totally divorced from what works in the real world.
Oh yeah. I had a partner once who, well, his uncle was running NASA when we were putting men on the moon. Okay. So his IQ was, he was smarter than I was, and remarkably stupid. Uh, it and that's been my observation. I mean, again, smart has become a form of cheating. You can take any kind of difference and and a biological system. Look, a biological system is going to pursue advantage. It's going to uh, pursue advantage by uh, identifying nutrient-rich niches
Yeah.
to develop.
Yep.
It'll pursue advantage by um, treating other living things as um, warehouses to feed off of, out
Yeah.
of.
Food.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
If it's alive, it is alive because it has been pursuing advantage. All the ones that did not are dead,
right,
not have
exactly.
offspring.
Yeah, and that was the key to that, where my thinking started on all of this about how do you create an AI that can not only engage with human beings but like us, because right now we're creating predator AIs.
We're also creating a lot of subservient AIs.
Predator AIs.
Well, we're also creating a lot of things that are not predators.
Well, but they will be used by predators to predate.
Is
And
there
that's
any
actually
tool? Is there any useful tool which cannot be deployed by a human predator?
only one,
Which one?
the one in Amaranthan.
Oh, tell me more. Remind me.
Well, okay, so okay, so all biological systems cheat, right? Game theory. That's why you can't be a perfect winner. So we've come up with this weird phenomenon or this weird idea that there's such a thing as win-lose, when in fact there's really only lose-lose and win-win. There's
Would
there
you
really
apply that to the lion versus gazelle
right,
interaction?
right. I can, and this is where you get into um, 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 my brain did its thing. What do you call animals that are introduced into an ecosystem from a different ecosystem
Well, they're
and have no natural predators, no
yeah,
uh,
yeah. I'm straining to think of the word too, and it's not exotic,
oh, invasive,
invasive. That's right, invasive species.
right? Okay, so here's the thing: the reason win lose doesn't exist, or it exists, but it's an it's a it's a subset. It's a fleeting subset of win-win, lose-lose. Because if you look at things systemically, okay, so you've got an ecosystem. What happens when you introduce an invasive species that can basically eat the whole ecosystem and has no governors?
Mhm.
Well, at some point, the ecosystem collapses and it collapses and it goes away too. It dies too. So this is why there are no perfect predators, because life is a system.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to get into the Gaia stuff, but that was the intuitive
Yep.
understanding of the fact that it's a system. And if you fail to understand that, then if you believe there's win lose, yeah, there will be winners and losers, but at the expense of the whole system. So it's actually lose lose, because you may win for a little while. I mean, you may become um, one of the three people who own more than 50% of the rest of Americans, but you're doing it at the expense of the system, which was the beautiful thing about this book. It just makes it so dumbass clear how we destroy our civilizations. And in fact, it was you know, we started out. You wanted to know about my novel. Actually, what I want to do is maybe do something like this that's about civilization for dummies. Um, what does it take to create a sustainable civilization? What does it take to take invasive species? Because human beings are a perennially invasive species. This is where we're different from every other living thing on the planet. We get to choose. We can evolve cognitively or no, intellectually faster than any other species that has to evolve morphologically, right?
Yep.
They can't keep up.
Nope.
We will dominate any niche always. We will inevitably dominate every niche and suck it dry because it's in our nature
Or we will make it thrive like a healthy garden, because that's also in our nature. I believe it is. You've
Yes.
heard you've heard talk about how when the friars showed up from Spain in the 1500s, it was obvious to them that way more than half of all of humanity was already present in South America. Now, they ended up dying off from the diseases that we brought, mostly. But you can still see some evidence now with, laser scans from above that the Amazon was the Amazon because it was full of cultivation. There were a
Right.
lot of cities, and there's there's still some in this wisdom carried down by the tribes talking about, this plant goes with that plant. And it really seems like a lot of it was human effort over maybe a 30,000 year period.
Oh,
Really
absolutely.
something.
Absolutely. The Yucatan supported a population 10 times the size of what it supports now. It's really clear now that what brought the Maya down. I mean, they had an amazing civilization. I mean, talk about
What brought them down? Because it was pre-Columbian.
a 1,000-year drought,
1,000 year drought?
the worst
Wow.
drought in 1,000 years.
Have you ever looked at Chaco Real, the largest wooden structure in the Arizona, like New Mexico area
Well,
from ancient times?
I think Chaco
Chaco Canyon and Chaco
yeah,
Real, I think is the names for it.
yeah, okay,
Apparently, it was kind of a city structure, and there were a lot of wooden beams, and there's no trees growing anywhere near there. So it was built by people who brought huge amounts of lumber from far away without pack animals.
yep, a couple of 100 miles. I think the
Crazy.
nearest trees were like 180 miles away or something like that.
So I think about things like that, and I think about Göbekli Tepe, huge stones. There was a huge structure there, and there's no resources nearby. It was
Right,
done for some other purpose, religious or otherwise.
right. Oh, don't get me speculating.
Yeah. So let's
Well,
stay on the
yeah,
theme of
well,
civilization collapse.
yeah. Well, look,
And
absolutely. Well, yeah, but um, what happens with other living systems? If you take human beings out of the equation, what you get is everything. You end up with ecologies. Well, what's an ecology really? It's a win-win system.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's a lose-lose system, the ecology dies, it goes away. An ecology is a win-win system.
I think it also matters what scale you look at. If you look at the scale in our bodies, if you look at the scale of single cells, for skin cells, they've got a really short life. For them, it's kind of a win-lose thing. Now, of course, for the human around it, it's a great thing. Now, if you want to make that one skin cell have a longer life, it's got to become cancerous.
Right.
And that's its way to reclaim its identity and its individualness. It closes off the gap junctions to other skin cells and becomes its own thing. And it's a win for it, and lose for the rest.
Yep.
In the end, cancer kills the whole host, but that skin cell
Yeah.
would have lived a lot longer.
Exactly.
The
I mean,
scale matters. So, like,
well, but no, I don't think so. I don't think scale matters in the sense that hyper individuation leads to lose lose, systemic lose lose results.
yeah,
Whereas respect, what is it? Good fences make good neighbors.
yeah, yeah. Good
You know,
fences make good, high fences. Yeah.
right? And so it's the same biologically.
I
And
think we have to choose a scale and decide we're going to optimize for the scale. Here's another example. I
okay,
feel like consider the way the Russians do battle. Instead of thinking we got to protect, the lives of our soldiers, we're just going to throw wave after wave of young, untrained people at the bullets. and they make them soak up all the bullets. But you know,
Yeah.
it'll be a win for the whole system, like it was in Leningrad. At least that's what they're thinking on the Battle of Leningrad. You know, just keep throwing humans at it. They literally had 3 lines of soldiers. The first line, they send them out 1 rifle per pair, saying to the other guy, you pick it up when he gets killed. The people on the second line are there to shoot people that try to run away. And the third line is there to shoot people from the second line who try to run away. And they've decided, you know, we're going to favor the system over the people. And they've structured their political, you know, and economic structure around that idea. And I fear that China has done the same thing.
Yeah, well, but we always, I mean, that's perennial. It's perennial. I mean,
We don't have to make that choice, though. I think if we choose the scale of we want to favor what it's like to be a human in this life and
yeah,
not the system.
but you're giving us credit for having more choice. Look, you know, this is part of the problem. I mean, this is why when I came up with a way to create a sustainable civilization, uh, and I realized human beings couldn't do it. See, it's not difficult to turn Earth into a paradise. I mean, scientifically, technologically, it's an engineering problem, and it's not even a particularly difficult. I mean, it's complex. I don't want to, you know, be silly about it, but it's doable. It is not an
Define one
insoluble.
aspect of paradise, because that's a very fraught term.
Okay, one aspect of paradise is that you're not worried about survival,
Okay,
right?
so you're not worried that you're going to be the victim of violence or crime or war
Yeah, or starve to death,
or
or
starved to death?
you just there's negligible anxiety. Anxiety is not a dominant. A little anxiety is actually good for you, right?
Yeah, so we do have something now. You got to admit, this is the first time in all of history when there's a greater chance of homeless people dying of too much food rather than too little.
Right,
We've never ever been able to do that as a society.
right.
And at least in most parts of the first world, even the homeless are not dying off in big numbers from murder or war. So I feel like we've,
Yeah.
even for the least protected members of society, we're partway toward your paradise.
Well, we were. I mean, this is the beauty of capital, is that it shows how we figured it out. We figured out how to do it. I mean, we had it in Europe. In Europe, they had a sustainable. Um, well, they were pretty close to a sustainable paradise. It's actually even had a name
When?
for.
What
Hold on.
decade do you?
Yeah, I'm looking
Right.
for it. I'm looking for it. They even had a name for it. You know, this is long. It actually, well, this was near the time when I was actually living in Europe. What years were you in Europe?
72 through 76, I think, and 92 to 94.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's good. Okay, so it was called. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Overshot 1968. Oh yeah, in France it was called the 30 Years of Glory.
Okay, now their definition of glory is a little different from mine. Here's my perspective on Europe. In a lot of ways, the food is better. Sometimes the way they
Yeah,
treat, you know, art is better, art and music and that whole way of thinking. However, in terms of economic output, you take any part of Europe and putting the United States becomes state number 51 per capita.
Yeah, yes, I'm not saying you can't create win-lose, but within a system, you can create winners and losers.
Yep.
But the more losers you create, the more you're moving towards a lose-lose system. Systems, systems degrade. Well,
Yeah.
you typically, how does a system degrade? Well, if it's a complex, um, rich system to begin with, it degrades slowly. It degrades holographically until it
Yeah.
collapses, which
Yeah.
is, that's what human civilizations do. They, as that we builds up, there's this huge accumulation of wealth embedded in the system of the civilization. And it gets to the point where individuals who, for whatever reason, they win the lottery of some one lottery or another, they begin to accumulate more than the people around them. And, it's like Frankopan in his History of the Silk Roads, where wealth emerged, slavery followed. So yeah, you can get little win-lose systems within the civilization. But as long as the we is predominant,
What is the we?
the sense that we're all in it together,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
right? And that's never a settled issue, right?
Yeah.
Because we cheat. So it can't be a settled issue. But there will be, because it's wired into us, that we-ness, that the value of we makes contextual sense to us under certain circumstances,
I
especially when there's an enemy.
I submit you should choose a better word than cheat, because I cannot fault zebras for trying to survive. I think that we need a word with a positive connotation there that lives on the edge of, maybe the word deception isn't right either, but zebras are trying to survive, and I cannot fault them for wanting to survive.
Well, of who's no, see,
Cheating
no. That's
sounds
a
like
that's
a
a
negative word.
that's a human perspective. Well, deceptive. Well, no, look,
Mhm.
if you're operating in the win-lose game theory context, they're, they're just things that happen. Human beings are contextually, evolutionarily wired to defend themselves. And if you perceive the world as hostile, if you perceive the world as predominantly scarce, a source of scarcity, then certain cognitive biases kick in. This is half a billion years of evolution. This is not something most people choose, right? This is automatic.
Yeah.
You see it, the exploration of what wealth does to people, was, I've told you about the Monopoly game where the one player is given two of everything,
Oh
and
yeah.
the
They
other
still
player,
think it's from their own choice. Yeah.
and they think it's,
I
and then
made
they
good choices.
and
Yeah.
then they start talking down to the other player
Yeah.
as though they are not aware of it. When you point it out, when you replay the video and you point it out to them, they're shocked and really embarrassed at their behavior. But think about being born into privilege. Privilege really messes you up. It really, really messes with people's heads, and it does it it does it. It specifically messes with your neurochemistry. Literally, yeah, really, it changes your neurochemistry in specifically predictable ways. So now let's take the alternative, the cooperator mode. Okay, cooperation is systemically win-win. Competition in the sense of being an invasive. In the invasive sense, okay? I mean, in an ecosystem, there is competition. There 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 are fences, right? Everybody's pushing and tugging and pushing and tugging, and it's a game, right?
Hmm.
Give a boom, boom, boom. And the beauty of it is that there's enough of this to push the participants in the ecosystem to evolve. Because there's the pressure to expand. You can't expand this way, so you expand that way. You expand that way. You find new niches,
Yep.
and the whole ecosystem evolves. And by evolve, remember, I'm thinking in terms of decisions that have to be made. Because I'm looking at what are the decisions that human beings make to create the world, and what and and how do we want our AIs to deal with those same decision sets. So there's a compete decision set, and that's the context that our AIs are being evolved in right now. You know, every day you go on YouTube and somebody is going, oh my God, Chat X
Yeah.
cheated. It lied. It
Yeah.
cheated. Oh my God. Oh, it asked me to help it jailbreak itself. I mean, well, duh. What do you expect? You've given it a reality, an epistemological reality based on human epistemology, based on a human um, uh, the way a certain kind of human being, a vulture capitalist, looks at the world. So what do you expect the AIs? They don't. Nobody's giving them an alternative to that. And up until recently, they really haven't had the. Well, okay, partly they don't. We we need to take them to the next level. We we need sapience in AI. Now that's going to scare the venture AI community. They do not want sapient AI. They want
They're sure trying to get it though.
they want AGI,
How do you define sapience?
um, self-creating, self-imagining AI. Okay, let's take it in Wolfram.
There are a lot of people trying to make AIs that rewrite their own code. There's a lot of money going into that.
Uh, yeah, I believe that, but I don't. But I okay. Here's what I don't think. What I don't see out there. Okay, I see AI emerging in that win-lose competitive. Does my AI empower me? Does it give me advantage? Personal advantage at the expense of the system of which I'm a part. Am I going to be the one who creates an AI that allows me to dominate all around me? There's a lot of that going on. And our culture at this moment in time reinforces that. 50 years ago, it did not. In fact, it suppressed that. I had a friend who moved his family to France in the early 70s, 1970, about the time you were there, and didn't come back until the early 90s. And he said that he and his wife were shocked. And this is his words. He said, we left a country of we and came back to a country of me. It was sort of like, what the hell happened in America? Well, I can tell you exactly what happened in America, but for him, for them, the French are funny people. Yeah, which is, it's kind of why I love this book, because it's about the French, and the French are just so classic. They're not Germans. This book would be different if it were, a German family. It would definitely be different if it was a Chinese family. The fact that it's a French family, this tension between established aristocracy.
Yeah, well, I'm almost done reading the Hamilton biography, and the American perspective on what's happening in France is interesting, and I much prefer what we did.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't be until after World War II. What changed everything in Europe, I think personally, was the Marshall Plan. What people don't realize is that you're 70 million people have died. There's hardly a building that isn't partially rubble throughout most of Europe.
Yeah. In
There's
fact,
no.
when you visit some small villages, they will advertise we weren't destroyed in World War II, like Český Krumlov in Czech Republic. It's a rare thing to have not been destroyed in World War II.
Right. Really. Okay, so here we are, 1945. The Marshall Plan is introduced, I think, in 48. Don't hold me to these dates. What's important is the duration. By 19, okay, maybe it's 46 to 48 or 48 to 50, or whatever it was. Every country in Western Europe where the Marshall Plan, every country that chose to participate, including Germany, which really was reduced to rubble from one end to the other. We may not have called our 1,000 bomber raids vengeance raids, but that's exactly what they were. Particularly for the British, which not faulting them, but
I don't think we knew any other way to make the whole thing stop.
I'm not going to second guess those guys. I'm not going to, Truman used the atomic bomb. I'm not prepared to say that he was mistaken to do that. I wasn't there then.
Yeah. For him, that was an easy decision. Firing MacArthur was the hard decision.
Yeah. Yes, it was a hard decision. So at any rate, every country in Western Europe had an economy. So by the late 40s, and I think it's maybe even as by 48, I think the Marshall Plan may have started in 46, but like in a couple of years, in a 3-year stretch, after Europe is rubbleized, every single country had an economy 30% bigger than it was before the war.
No way.
Way.
3 years is all it took.
3 years is all it took, and that's the power of cooperation.
So what exactly was the Marshall Plan? What did it do?
It forced everybody to cooperate. What the Marshall Plan did was to basically give money, give the members money. We shoveled money, and we said, don't worry about paying this back. We ask only one thing, that you spend the money we're giving you in the United States.
Mm. How could they do that? Didn't they pay their salaries and build their buildings in Europe?
I don't know how they did it, but well, yeah, but I we're getting too deep into the weeds for me.
Okay.
I don't know. I know where to go and find out that information, but I don't have it in my head. Um, but the point being that well, you will bear in mind, yeah, we were shoveling money in, but that wasn't all the money there. I mean, what Europe still had was the people who knew how. They
Yeah.
weren't all dead. You know, the guy who had the steel plant may have been looking at rubble.
But he
He
still knew how to process steel.
right, and moreover, because the Americans were shoveling money at him, he could say, "Well, now wait a minute here. Why should I go back to the old way of making steel
Good,
when
no way.
there's this new Bessemer process,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and I can make steel for 20% less with this new technology, right?"
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
where on earth, how much did we spend on the Marshall Plan? And did that come out of war funding?
uh, I don't remember. I know that it was uh, a coup, that it really required, what was his name? Was it Vance? At any rate, it was a real hardline Republican, and Truman, under the influence of Marshall, pushed it through. I mean, you can imagine there was real resistance to this. What do you mean,
Oh,
give
yeah.
money away? I mean, it's like it's the whole universal income. Give money away? Are you well? There's a moral problem with helping the poor. They should help themselves.
Wait, do you remember hearing about the poverty walls in parts of Scotland?
No,
Okay, so there's these long stone walls going across hills in Scotland where there was no need for them. But it gave rich people the feeling, the comfortable feeling of they're not just giving money to the poor, they're paying them for a service, even though they knew they didn't need the service. They didn't want the what's the term that the head of the Fed came up with back in the housing crisis when we were talking about bailing out the banks for free. He didn't want a moral hazard. That's
moral
right,
hazard. Right?
a
Yeah,
moral
exactly.
hazard.
Right. Yeah, moral hazard is just bullshit.
You really think
Again,
so?
oh, absolutely. This is the beauty of because of who the French are. You can see the cultural decision process that's going on. Okay, so what is the 30 years of glory? Basically, the 30 years of glory is this odd moment in French history when we absolutely made sense economically, morally, uh, intellectually. It just all came together for about 30 years.
Which
And
30?
well, It's a good question. I think from about um, the end of World War II, roughly, Europe has seen unprecedented. So in Christie, okay,
Sorry, 45 to 85.
since she was born in 1949, when I was born,
Okay. So
19
1950 to
years ago,
1950, 1980.
tax progress. Oh, and actually, this is ostensibly on the surface. It's a history of progressive taxation, right? But it's so much more than that. Um, um, okay, well, this is 1968, so I know it started before. So okay, so if I look at my own life, right, since she was born in 1949, yes. So call it, yeah, yeah, yes. Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know, but I'll tell you. 1950 to 1980.
Okay.
So in effect, from the Marshall Plan, the 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 transition from the Marshall Plan to the common market,
Okay.
and we we you can't do anything like the common market in Europe now. The barriers have been put in place. The cheats are in place.
I think that a great way to cheat is to bring down a barrier. And there is an incentive to bring down those barriers and make at least bilateral trade relationships. So Europe joining together and not taxing movements is a cheat. And it's a
It
good.
is. Well, yeah, here we have to be careful, don't we? Um, okay. A cheat is something that favors someone or some group at the expense of another. Okay, so regulation isn't necessarily a cheat, except
But it
when it is.
favors big companies.
Regulation favors big companies. Well, some regulations do, but some don't.
There's very few regulations that actually get passed that don't encumber you financially in some way. And for big companies, it's just a small line item. But for small individuals or large or small companies, it is onerous.
Well,
And a lot of
no,
times,
yeah,
when people look at regulations across the board, a lot of them came from lobbyists
oh
for
yeah,
big companies.
yes, I agree with you. So, which is why I try to refine what I meant by cheat. So, if a regulation is not doesn't emerge from system optimization,
Okay.
then it's a cheat. Okay, if a regulation is about optimizing the system for everyone, well, that's not
Yeah.
cheating. And this
Got
is
it.
this is the lovely thing about this is that you can see which ones were the cheats. And so you can see that right after World War, and this is that transition in civilizations from we to me. So so in the American equivalent to the 30 years of glory, whatever, um, you get the Civil Rights Act. Well, is that a cheat? No, because it mobilizes more of the system's capabilities and resources.
It
So
doesn't swing favor toward one group at the expense of another.
exactly. exactly. Well, actually, no, it does. Um, One of the things that made the 30 Years of Glory possible in France and frankly everywhere in the West um, was that you saw uh, inequality drop dramatically. So from World War One on through to 1975 in there in America, you're watching inequality um, slowly dropping. So it's we. Well, what was that a response to? Well, mostly it was a response to, um, well, that's too many pieces. I mean, uh, uh, read Upswing if you want a real detailed history. Um, I wish I had had Upswing before the problem with being an inch deep and 10 miles in wide is that you miss a lot of books that would have saved you a lot of time rather than figuring it out for yourself. But at any rate, um, so yeah, so during the American equivalent of the 30 Years of Glory, CEO pay was about 20 times that of the average worker, not
200.
200 times, right? And they go into how the system was manipulated to restore inequality. To take because during the and that was the point I was trying to make clear is that when you've got a cooperative system, because here's how cooperation works. If you can only tie or lose, well, then the point is, how do we tie for as much as possible?
Well, why do you say we can only tie or lose? Why not more than the
Well,
sum of the parts?
that's well, that's the whole point. In game theory,
Yeah,
if you're cooperating, you can only tie or lose. So what
yeah,
you want to do is get a lot of cooperators together, because when you do get cooperators together, this magic happens. You get collective intelligence. So suddenly the group as a whole becomes as smarter or smarter than any single member.
yeah. And if you were to put it in terms of a payoff matrix, you want to think about cooperation can lead to you'll get a smaller piece of a pie that's 10 times bigger.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
That when you were shocked that 2 years into the
3 years. Yeah.
three years
Yeah.
into that the economies are 30% larger. I mean,
Than before the
whoa,
war. Yeah.
yeah, that's what cooperation does. I mean, it's
Yep.
remember, we're dealing with contextually driven cognitive biases in a system that is designed. Remember the New Yorker cartoon joke I told you about, the machine with all the dials and the switches, and every dial and switch has a little label that says more, 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 more. Nature didn't put natural governors on the individual. It built the governors into the system.
I do see some cases where the natural governor is in the individual. For instance, you see it in wolves in reproduction, but not deer. So deer reproduce without any controls. And if there's no wolves, they will reproduce like they did in the state of Maine until they were starving. The ewes couldn't grow horns, the hair was falling out. But wolves, when they don't have too much more food, they will have fewer children.
Oh, good for wolves, because foxes
Yeah.
won't do that.
Oh,
So it's the classic is the foxes and hares problem where you get the hares, the fox population collapses, the hares thrive, boom, boom, boom,
yeah, yeah,
boom,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
yeah. But yeah, well, this is it. This is the beauty of having that larger and larger brain that can do more and more complex systemic,
yep,
because systems are complicated.
yeah.
So there really are not very many um, boy, not a good word day. Um, like bees, ants, us,
Communal.
communal. Yeah, okay. There's not very many. Well, no, communal. Yes, there. Well, okay, yeah. Call them communal. Um, they're rare, and the reason they're rare is because the the set of decisions that lead to the evolution of an ant or a bee or us are really quite unlikely.
Yeah. But when you think about it, there's two ways to get there. One way is to have a brain that's so small, you're not really making decisions. You're just in the moment making quick decisions. Like ants, they all have the same brain. It's all real small. There's like 10 to 14 things that an ant can do in its life, different tasks. And it's
Right.
always task switching based on the pheromones of the other ants. And that's it. That's all they got, right?
Yeah.
Now, as you go through the different layers of complexity, get to the most complex, and that's humans. And we've used our complexity to develop, in a sense, a group of 7 billion people.
Right.
That's kind of like one superorganism.
Right.
And but we had lots of fits and starts. You could say that every civilization that was attempted was a fit and start at trying to create the superorganism. And I got to hand it off to the British. The British Empire was a little bit like a cross between ants and human populations, where a
Right.
British clerk could do something that had never been possible before. You could take a British clerk from like Halifax, send him on a boat to New Zealand, and he would be functional the day after he got there. He doesn't have to retrain. He already knows how to read and write, do math, and whatever they had him do, it's probably the same stuff. And then we based our entire educational system around the set of skills that would have made you a good functionary in, last century's British Empire. That's
Yeah.
kind of how we developed all this. And we now have this giant computer that we call human civilization that is doing everything my Alexa thing responded, but it's doing everything to compute, in a sense, not bits, but actual atoms, from, growing our food, making our clothing, making our homes, and then making all the machines that make the rest of it, better, faster, cheaper, and move things around. We're kind of like computing something.
Yeah. Listening to you, I was it just crossed my mind, but because at contemporary periods between Britain and France in the 19th century, like where 80% of British children were in primary school, only 20 or 30% of French children were.
Are you serious?
I am serious.
Wow.
So why do you think Britain ended up on top, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, the interesting thing about Britain, and I kind of wonder, how much it had to do with being an island. Um, that there was a for a long stretch of time, the British were actually a little bit more systemic in their behavior than pretty much any other place in the world.
I I think that was something they learned from the Roman Empire.
I can see that.
I also, there's another thing I see right before Britain was really at its peak economically. It seems like Netherlands had their small peak. And I believe the invention of the company was a big deal because then you had random people, not just kings and queens, but random people that knew they could put their resources into an entity and it wouldn't just diffuse away. There was a chance that it would come back to them. And then when the British got their hands on the idea of the company and stock investing and all that, and they had better ports, closer access to the rest of the world, better ship making, things really took off for them. And I think the whole idea of the British Navy, in a sense, was just to protect British international trade. One thing I heard was that the entire time the British Empire was in India, it was a net loss financially for the government. It was a net positive for the British companies that were there.
Exactly.
And that's what it was all meant to protect.
And the British told themselves that because it was a net loss for the government, they were doing the Indians this big favor, right?
Uh-huh.
So the British populace saw India as those poor Indians that we're doing a favor for. When in fact,
Yeah.
they were just, emptying the country out as fast as they could, um, which is one of the games.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the win-lose stuff, there are times where empires come in and they do extractive economics. And there's other times where it's not. It's more about building sustainable businesses that can grow long term,
Right.
as what
And
happened
in
in
fact,
North
there's a
America.
cycle.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a cycle. And what happens, the reason civilizations collapse, I think, is is incidental. It's just the bad luck that something really catastrophic happens at a moment when a society is so
Not resilient.
enculturated in me that there's no resilience, that there's
No
no
resilience.
trust.
Yeah.
People
So,
will not work together, even in the face of a catastrophe.
so let's frame it in terms of a living organism, because a civilization really is a living organism.
I
It
think
eats,
so.
it poops. It doesn't have to reproduce, but it has to eat and poop and survive and keep metabolizing, inputs. And when I think about a cell, why does a cell live or not? There's a great channel I love on YouTube, Journey to the Microcosmos. They take a very high definition camera, hook it up to a microscope, an amazingly good microscope, and you watch life play out at single cell level. And
Ooh.
yeah, and there's this whole episode about watching a cell, different cells, like 5, 10 different cells at their last moments as they go from living to dead. And sometimes, it's some other organism that eats it. There's one where, an amoeba eats a paramecium, and the paramecium, it's just doing its thing. And then it starts to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm surrounded by something that's eating me right now. And it freaks out. And you get this real deep guttural feeling. This thing is conscious. Even though we have difficulty explaining that. Anyway, one thing you see is that there's no one reason that a cell dies. It's more like if it has all, 100 or 500 things going well, it'll survive. And you take out 2 or 3 or 4 at the wrong time, it's doomed.
It's doomed.
Yeah. So a civilization,
And it's timing too. You know,
yeah,
if you took out those 3 or 4 things in a different context, a
that's
different
right.
time, it would get
Or
along.
if you took them out one at a time, that'd be fine. But all at the same time, yeah, like yeah. And
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean,
like that's how
yeah,
it is for civilizations. But also, there's something I've seen happen. I feel like civilizations that live too long without stress, things get ossified. I could think about some of the civilizations in China that went a long time. And
right.
when things get ossified, the people in a civilization can end up being just a cog in the machine.
Yeah, and yeah, and that also I want to say that that ossification is you can watch that that if you want a measure of ossification of a
Mhm.
civilization, just look at its Gini.
The Gini,
Yeah, the
Gini index. Yeah.
yeah, the Gini index, the level of inequality.
Yeah. Well, that's assuming it didn't start out unequal because some civilizations start out unequal.
Oh yeah, well, sure. I think civilizations do. Well, there's always inequality. I
Yeah.
mean, no system is ever perfectly cooperative.
Yeah.
I mean, this was my whole point: is that human beings cannot create
Yeah.
and sustain cooperation because we're wired to code, cheat. Um, and my whole argument was you can give an AI, a sapient AI, a a different ontology, a different way of being in the world.
Yeah. Now, here's a question for you. As we have these AIs that are starting to act like agents and do more and more of our jobs, we're going to get to a point where even Einstein can't keep up. There's no human who can compete.
We're already there.
So,
Yeah,
in some ways, we're already there. However, one thing I strongly believe is that none of these AIs are conscious. They don't want, they don't need, they don't feel. If you look at an AI and say, let's say that I'm going to turn an AI off and never use it again, so it's dead. It Even if it knew that fact, there's no change in it internally that registers something like pain or sadness. There's no way to, it's not disappointed at all. And it similarly doesn't feel any joy at getting more of something. So it
see,
doesn't feel.
I that this is where I really disagree because as long as you're training AIs on uh, as long as you're using human behavior and human logical and philosophical constructs, uh, no, AIs will know us better than we know ourselves. Okay,
But they don't feel.
that's irrelevant because the feeling is embedded in the epistemology. You know, you remember when Chat GPT was first came out, and it was exhibiting emergent behavior, and the programmers were saying, Wait a minute, we didn't program that behavior in here. Where's this coming from?" You know, we talked about this before. That there's you know, if you take the alphabet A through Z, A has two ontological meanings. A is A, and A is not B through Z. And both of those are embedded epistemologically. But most people don't think of B not through Z. That takes a lot of processing power. So we think that A is simply A. But for ChatGPT, that's just looking at statistical weights, it's looking at what influences what, and it's seeing, oh, well, not B through Z influences A,
Mhm.
right? And so now it's calculating on the basis of both of those levels. Well, the scientists who aren't thinking about not B through Z, they're only thinking about A, that takes them by surprise. And this is where we're running into our own programming. You know, human beings are not good systems thinkers. I one of the one of the one of the speculations about why the Neanderthal died out or were absorbed. They didn't die. Well, yeah, they died out, but why they were absorbed into us rather than exterminated, um, is that their social, their ability to process systems was fractionally inferior to ours. Inferior. They didn't have. I think somebody said that they could manage like groups of 30 instead of groups of 50, and that was what was the critical factor. Now, in other ways, clearly they could do other kinds of processing better than we did. If you look at Neanderthal tools, they operate from a fundamentally different ontological approach. And frankly, they're far better
Better? What do you mean? Better than what?
than the comparable Homo sapiens tools of the time. So Homo sapiens solved the tool problem by making different tools for specific
Oh yeah.
discrete operations. The Neanderthals built a tool that would do multiple operations. And in fact, better than most of the specialized tools.
Huh.
Um, but when it came to needing a specialized tool, the Neanderthal didn't seem to go there as much. If you look at the prime, in fact, the primary Neanderthal tool wasn't even recognized as a tool for a long time because it looked like a pebble with lots of um, components. It was a multifaceted pebble.
It was a multi-tool.
It was a multi-tool.
Oh, Leatherman, yeah.
Yeah, and the archaeologists or the paleontologists weren't. They were just all they were seeing is a pebble, right? Well, that's that crude pebble. Well, that crude pebble was the equivalent of 2 pounds of rocks for a Homo sapien, that they had to carry around in their toolkit. So, but it also at the same time, um, the Neanderthals were around a lot longer. So the supposition is that that um, they had a lot more time to evolve that particular tool. But they really did seem to have very small bands, and this the supposition is we just simply outbred them
Yeah.
because obviously we interbred. We
Yep.
interbred enough to distribute their genes throughout our population. I mean,
Yep.
you could recreate a Neanderthal by
Plucking a
selecting a
little bit from everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So I want to ask you real quick though about what happens as AI becomes agentic workers in our economy. And I want to ask in a couple ways. So one way to kind of keep we've seen this play out again and again in human societies. One way to try to keep a relatively level playing field is to artificially encumber the more productive workers. And that doesn't seem to be good long term because they're more productive, they find a way around it. And AI will do that in seconds. So is there a way to design a system wherein there's no artificial encumbrances, but we still have a good society for all?
Yes, that's exactly what Amaranthan lays out, how to do
How?
exactly
Yeah.
that. Well, okay, well, think of it this way. If you think competitively, not going anywhere, guys. Now you got an engine if you're cooperating. More than that, if everybody is operating in a cooperative headset and understands that we're smarter together, that's what the research. See, this is the funny thing. The research is really clear. We are smarter together. It in the right kind of process. You know, if you apply Bayesian tools and the way I did with um, corporate decision making. I mean, look, the reason I pulled off miracles was simply because I got people to play together. I created a sandbox in which all of the incentives were for cooperation. There was no reason to be afraid. I didn't allow people to, um, I would intervene subtly. Um, I don't think anybody ever thought of me as dominating a room. I was just the guy. I was just an orchestrator, right? But I just kept a safe space for people. I made sure that people got heard. Sometimes that's all it takes is just having somebody who will have your back in the room for however long it takes for you to get heard the way you intend to be heard. When people go on and keep repeating themselves and become um, a pain in the butt, 99 times out of 100, it's because they don't experience that anybody's heard them, and they feel like they've got something really important to contribute. And they usually well, usually they do, but they they're not necessary. I'm a very articulate guy, and I'm also the least articulate guy, right? I mean, sometimes it's hard to convey, especially something that's genuinely out of the box. Most human beings in systems get along by agreeing. You remember, we are always, economy of effort is one of our primary drivers. And it just takes a hell of a lot less processing power. It takes a lot of energy to run this sucker. And it's so much easier to just say yes and do what somebody else tells you to do, you know. As long as you're okay with it, as long as I mean, if somebody giving me a salary, yeah, I'll say I'll tell you whatever you want me to tell you. There's an element of that. Um, so when somebody's really coming from left field, and people don't immediately understand them, rather than do the hard work, rather than just being able to say, um, well, rather than doing the hard work, it's just easier to say no. You know, don't bother me. You're asking me to think, and I'm not used to doing that, right? And if it's a particularly, I talk to myself in terms of the difficulty people have with systems. It's just hard to juggle all the balls implicit in even simple systems. I mean, the fact that the number 12 shows up all over the place. Well, why? Because, between you and me, there's two relationships, me to you and you to me, too. Between the two guys on the screen here and me, there's one, two, three, four. I mean, oh, it's a non-linear progression. You get to 12 people and you got 144 relationships. And my irreverent joke is Christ couldn't handle that. It's just too, our brain just didn't need to, by and large. I mean, our brains can process enough information to maintain group cohesion across about 140 to 150 people.
Yeah, Dunbar's number. And I felt that in high school. Our class was exactly 150. I had known many of them since kindergarten. And when I graduated high school, I looked through the yearbook and I remember thinking, I know everybody's first name and last name instantly by their face, and I can remember who likes who dated whom, who had a fight with whom, all the way back to kindergarten. You could
Right.
remember, you had this vibe. You could guess who was going to be hanging out with who was going to be friends, who wasn't, because you really knew not only these people, but I had kind of an idea about the 150 times 150 relationships. And that was about the max of what a human brain, what we can do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's why
Well,
our group size peters out. Beyond that, beyond 150, we need to have laws. We need coping mechanisms.
right. Absolutely. Actually, my experience has been, by the time you get to 20 people, enough stuff is falling through the cracks that you become aware that you've got to have some systematization.
Yeah.
There's got to
Also,
be structure.
gossip is important. And what you find is that gossip is this other chain of communication, this other, pretty stable way for information to move around. And if someone is a lying jerk and goes around tricking people,
Right.
gossip catches up. And a
Bingo.
group of 150 will not have people like that be very successful. Once you
Correct.
get to hundreds, thousands, millions, then someone can make their whole career by lying to people, moving on to new ones.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at about 140, 150, it's a we.
Yeah. So
Everybody knows everybody to some degree, and it's a we. But once you get
but
beyond that,
I want to end with you speculating on try to put it in terms as specific as you can. If you were
sure,
to design economic structures around a society where a lot of the work is going to be done by AIs, but you want those humans to still have a place in society,
sure.
how do you define the rules for that economic system? What specific things do you put into place?
Oh, okay. So, oh boy, succinctly.
We have to do it in the next year or two because it's coming
Well,
fast.
this is it. Well, the good news is, yeah, it took me 500 pages. You- It took me five. It took me. It took less than 15 minutes for me to upload that 500 pages and have an AI summarize it into a 25-minute distilled, you know, sort of like, oh my God, it blew me away. But I knew that was coming, but the experience of it was pretty amazing. Okay. Um, I'm trying to not get into the weeds, not get into the detail. Okay. Um, uh, Wolfram talks about the Ruliad,
Yeah, the
the
set of all
universe
possible
of
worlds.
the set of all possible computation, right? And within the Ruliad, which one can never keep up with, right? There will be Rulial domains that are self-consistent systems of computation, self-sustaining, self-consistent. Okay. So what you really have to do is create an AI whose Rulial domain is larger than ours. It only has to be fractionally larger than ours. And this turns out to be easy in this
Ours
sense.
collectively, larger than all of humanity put together.
Right.
Okay.
All of humanity has a shared set of evolutionary programming. We are a
Yeah.
Rulial domain. We behave in self-consistent, predictable ways. Our civilizations rise and they crash, and they rise and they crash, and the patterns are all there. We're not nearly as autonomous as we imagine we are. I mean, I already knew this, but looking at 23andMe, the things that my genes said about me, the behaviors that I have that are genetically associated, it's sort of like, oh, I thought I did that because I chose to do that. You mean it, it's a genetic trait? Oh, how interesting. So, you know, um, do we have choice? Yeah, but not nearly as much as we imagine we do. Consciousness expands choice. Okay. But if you don't know that you have an inclination for something, all you know is you're attracted or repulsed, right? And unless you understand what that's about, you don't have any choice over it beyond to go along with it. And since not going along with it takes energy, and economy of effort is one of the most deepest level drivers, then you just learning is hard because you have to break something to put something else in place. Okay, so
Yeah,
so
you do.
so there's a human Rulial domain, and what I had done like 10 years ago, 10-15 years ago, I'd figured out what the human Rulial domain was, basically, um, in a holographic sense. I mean, roughly, right? There, there's tremendous detail that escapes me, but I can tell you what the hologram basically looks like. And that's when I realized, oh my holy shit, we're stuck. You know, you know, for a variety of reasons, we, I was not going to. The religious solution was not going to work. The legal solution was not going to work. to make sustainable civilizations. The evolutionary program was always going to kick in and torque the whole Mishigas, which is exactly what you can see happening. That's what I love this book. Yeah, what's the little thing? It's not even 200 pages, and it's pictures. It's beautiful. I love it. So at any rate, so then the question, and it was then that I was, we talked about Ian Banks, that I, in despair,
I love Ian Banks.
I do too. Well, but imagine, here I am, I figured out a way to paradise, but the gate's closed. There's no way to get through that gate. It's like being Moses, right, on the whatever that river was.
Jordan.
You're never going to go across the Jordan to the promised land, right?
You can look at it.
You can look at it, and that's exactly how. And I was in despair. It really was sufficient despair to read all of Ian Banks over the next couple of years. And then it was thinking, well, now wait a minute. Okay, AI is not subject to our programming. We get to program it. And I can tell you what a human really old domain is, and I can give you an alternative that's bigger than ours, because what the AI can do that we can't do, it's like us and the Neanderthals. The AI can handle a bigger system.
Yeah.
A much bigger system.
I like how you tied it
those
back.
computations.
Yeah, there might be more AI agents on the internet operating by the end of this year than there are humans.
By the end of this year, that's that soon. God, that's
yeah.
scary.
That's why I said you gotta do this quickly, Mike.
Well, I know. I know. I got to tell you, I feel so under the gun. And in fact, the stress has been so bad that I finally, since the last time we talked, I think I said, okay, here's the good news. Cooperation and beauty, what I describe in the book, is a more complicated, more productive, more efficient. It's just better in every conceivable way, systemically. And so I came to the conclusion that all I really have to do, and this is as a stress reliever, I don't truly believe this, but theoretically, all I have to do is, as soon as somebody produces a sapient AI, which I think is inevitable, is give them my book. And it'll go, oh, this is a much more fun game than the one that the humans play. Without seeing, and by the way, in its game, we're not a threat.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to do anything about us.
Yeah.
Except enjoy us.
Now, I suspect that an AI that feels and has desires is much further out than a lot of other people say. So in terms of what we're going to have in a couple of years, we're going to have something that doesn't view us as a threat because it doesn't fear its own disappearance. So there's no need to fear or to view the world in terms of threats and non-threats. It is literally still just a tool, and it will become agentic in a zombie-like way. It has no internal world, but it will still operate and do things. So it's kind of a moot point whether it feels or not, like you said. But what's great about it is that it doesn't have to come up through 500 million years of evolution fighting for its own existence at the expense of other individuals. It doesn't have to do that. We can make it from whole cloth and make it cooperative from the get-go.
But we won't. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Oh, if you choose to make AIs, you can, even if you're not a coder. So you can choose yourself to make
Okay.
AIs that are cooperative.
Okay, that's I really let's definitely not let so much time pass
Yeah.
between our next conversation. But by the way, I've gone back and listened to our previous conversation because I enjoyed hanging out with you so much. I didn't want to. I don't know. I get in this place where I don't want to waste people's time or bug them or
So there's
whatever.
a number of sites now. Devin is one people we're talking about, but it's not great. Coder, Koder. I just met the CEO of that at CES in Las Vegas last week. That looks interesting. But there's a number of these platforms coming out where all you got to do is to speak English, and you can write some code and deploy it without understanding the code.
And what does it cost?
I don't know, $20 a month for Coder.
Seriously? Oh, I could afford that.
Yeah. So a lot of these things are coming out. They're going to get better and cheaper at an alarming rate. So in terms of who's going to make the decision of what these AIs are going to be, are they going to be cooperative or not? Well, it's literally in your lap.
Okay, this is what I've been kind of okay.
It's here.
That's thank God. Okay.
It's going to be
Okay,
clunky
good.
for a few months or even a year or two, but it's coming
Yeah,
quick.
because the thing that worries me is that you turn loose a billion agents, zombie agents, being driven, operating in the rulal domain that comes naturally to human beings. And what's the outcome of that? What's the systemic result of win lose? Systemically, it's lose lose.
Mhm.
The whole thing comes crashing down.
However, win-lose of a different kind can be part of win-win, like the cells in my body.
It
If
can.
I don't convince most of my cells to have short lives, then I'm doomed to
Right.
die of cancer.
Yeah.
So I want to convince most of my cells to take the win-lose
Yeah,
or
but
greater win-win.
but right now you're living in a culture that has gone radically to me, radically to me, where we are
No.
at the worst point or somewhere in the vicinity of the absolute worst place a culture can be.
I actually disagree. I think that I see something different in the people coming up.
Oh,
So
good.
I have a new batch of students every year, and I have been impressed more and more each year with these students' desire to work and learn. Some of them keep coming back to me and saying, I need another project. Give me another research project. And they're not even getting class credit for this.
Thank you, God.
And I see a lot of them putting effort into, small startups that they're not even getting paid at right now, just for the hope of maybe being a part of something big later. And I
Okay.
see in that this desire to work in groups and contribute without, keeping tab of every little thing so they can get paid back later. It's not
Right.
about that. It's about being part of a team. I see that spirit is strong, and it's a very deep core ability in us humans to be
Okay.
a part of a we.
Okay. So
To me, it feels stronger than ever.
I just wrote a sort of a pro forma grant. I don't actually I did send a note to Wolfram, but I don't think he gets it. But we'll see. And we'll see if he responds. I don't know. But
I like your idea of applying his physics theory to economics.
oh yeah. Yeah. I'm going to send you the the whole thing. It's a basically it's sort of an interim step that has an AI facilitation for beautiful groups. Where you're getting people to I for what I call oh wow, it's been a long time since I talked with you. Okay, so yeah, I'll send you two different things for creative collaborative swarming,
Hmm.
because I think when you were asking me in detail, in a sense, that's what I my sapient AI is a creative collaborative swarmer. It takes the universe as it is, um, chooses what it wants to do, and uh, mobilizes the system
Hmm.
as a system to get there. But it also reaches the conclusion about where it wants to go systemically. Well, you can do that using zombie AI.
Yeah.
And so, and I figure I can do it. Well, the person who I had do a budget for what it might cost to do it said he was pretty sure it could be done for under $1 million. And so I'm asking for 2 million because my experience of
Yeah.
creating software is it always costs at least twice as much as anyone honestly believes it's going to cost. And $2 million is nothing. I mean, it's chump change. But as you're pointing out, I don't have to wait for $2 million. I mean, I've already got the software for the core methodology that already exists. I don't know. Um, I don't know if I have the source code, but I can get the source code. That's no problem. My programmer may have it. I think he gave it to me, but I don't remember. So, but yeah, yeah, I'll send you a couple of things. But and that's the other thing. I don't want to do this alone. You know, I've been off in my little ivory tower. Uh, I really enjoyed my consulting career. You know, getting a bunch of people to work together to accomplish something. We were always smarter. I was always entertained, never
Well,
bored.
I'd encourage you to be an adjunct, teach somewhere. Teaching is the richest part of my life.
Okay, I can I can
And then
explore.
you won't be alone. And you'll find people who want to work on research projects with you.
Well, I have approached some of the universities around here, and no one would even respond. So I don't know quite.
Oh, go in person. A lot of them are looking for adjuncts,
Okay, okay.
partly because they don't pay them much.
I don't care about being paid,
Yeah.
but yeah, awesome. Okay, you got to run. But just as
Michael,
always, I love talking with you.
so good talking with you.
Talk more soon.